A wife who is abandoned on a cruise gets revenge, ha. Thanks for visiting Mrs. Humpty Dumpty Storytime. Deep waters. Departure. Savannah stood at the port terminal, staring at the text message on her phone, her fingers trembling. The screen blurred as her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. Around her, clusters of excited travelers bustled about, laughter and conversation buzzing in the warm air. She felt like an island of quiet devastation in the middle of their joy. Her gaze drifted to the ship towering before her, the Oceanic Serenade, a marvel of engineering and luxury. It was everything she had imagined, a floating palace promising opulence, adventure, and romance. She had spent months planning this trip down to the smallest detail, picturing herself and Matt sipping cocktails on the deck, dancing under the stars, and exploring foreign ports together. It was supposed to be their reset, a chance to rekindle the fire that had dwindled over the years. But now, she was alone. "Hey, babe. I have an emergency at work, so I can't make the cruise. Go ahead without me, and I'll make it up to you." That was it. No explanation, no apology, not even the decency of a phone call, just a text. Savannah had stared at the words for hours, rereading them until they felt meaningless. Now, they were burned into her mind, fueling the ache in her chest. "Everything all right, a cheerful attendant in a crisp navy uniform asked, her clipboard tucked against her hip. She had a smile so bright it seemed almost cruel. Savannah forced herself to nod, a tight, polite smile tugging at her lips. "Yes, I'm fine," she lied. The attendant gestured toward the gangway. "Wonderful. You're all set to board. Welcome aboard the Oceanic Serenade. We're so glad to have you." Savannah hesitated. The gangway stretched before her like a bridge between two worlds, the one she knew and the unknown. A part of her wanted to turn around, call a cab, and go home. What was the point of this trip without Matt? How could she face 7 days surrounded by happy couples when the one person she wanted by her side had abandoned her? She glanced back at the terminal. Families were hugging goodbye, friends were snapping selfies, and couples were wrapped in each other's arms, glowing with anticipation. They were stepping into a dream. She felt like she was walking into a nightmare. But what would she return to? An empty house. Matt would be at work, always at work, unreachable until he decided he wanted to be. And when he did, it would be on his terms, not hers. She'd waited long enough for him and prayed for him to notice her again. She wanted him to remember who she was, and who they were together. Savannah lifted her chin. She'd be there for herself if he wouldn't be there for her. She deserved that much. She took a deep breath, hoisted her bag, and stepped onto the gangway. The creak of the metal beneath her feet seemed to echo her uncertainty, but with every step, her resolve hardened. She wouldn't let Matt's indifference ruin this trip. The moment she crossed onto the ship, the atmosphere shifted. Cheerful music played over the speakers, and the scent of fresh flowers mingled with the tang of the ocean breeze. A smiling crew member handed her a glass of champagne as she boarded, the bubbles fizzing against the rim of the crystal flute. "Welcome aboard," the woman said brightly. Savannah managed a faint smile as she accepted the glass, her gaze sweeping over the grand atrium. It was breathtaking. Glittering chandeliers hung from the high ceilings, glowing warmly over polished marble floors and sweeping staircases. Staff in pristine uniforms moved efficiently among the guests, guiding them to their cabins or helping with luggage. Passengers posed for photos, their faces alight with joy and excitement. Savannah followed the stream of passengers to the reception desk, where a friendly clerk checked her in and handed her a keycard to her cabin. She forced herself to thank him and made her way through the ship's winding corridors, trying to ignore the couples passing her, their hands entwined, their laughter ringing in her ears. When she reached her cabin, she paused at the door, the weight of her suitcase and her emotions dragging her down. The room was beautiful, luxuriously appointed with a king-size bed, a sitting area, and a private balcony overlooking the sparkling water. A bottle of wine sat chilling in an ice bucket on the table, flanked by 2 glasses. Savannah stared at the glasses, her throat tightening. She had imagined so many moments with Matt, the two of them sitting on the balcony, watching the sunset, sharing stories over a bottle of wine, laughter warming the air between them. All of it was gone now, replaced by a suffocating emptiness. She set her suitcase down, opened the balcony doors, and stepped out into the salty breeze. The horizon stretched endlessly before her, the ocean glittering under the afternoon sun. The sound of waves lapping against the hull was soothing, but it did little to ease the ache in her chest. The ship's horn blared, signaling departure, and Savannah gripped the railing as the port slowly began to shrink into the distance. She had never felt so alone. But something shifted inside her as she watched the coastline fade into the horizon. The ache in her chest began to harden, transforming into something sharper, something more resolute. She wasn't going to let Matt's indifference destroy her, not anymore. This trip would be hers, hers to enjoy, hers to reclaim. She would find a way to let go of the pain, even if it meant pretending for a little while. And maybe she could see a piece of herself again in the process. Savannah spent the rest of the day exploring the ship, trying to push the gnawing loneliness to the back of her mind. She wandered through the grand atrium, browsed the boutiques, and even lingered at the piano bar, sipping another glass of wine. She wasn't exactly having fun, but she wasn't crying in her cabin either, and that felt like a small victory. Later that evening, her phone buzzed as she sat on her balcony, wrapped in a soft blanket and watching the stars. She almost ignored it. Nothing good had come from her phone lately, but curiosity got the better of her. She unlocked the screen to find a notification from one of her social media apps. It was a post from a woman she didn't recognize, but the caption made her blood run cold. This view, this ship, this man. My dream come true. Savannah clicked on the photo with trembling hands. It was a sunset shot, the sky streaked with gold and pink, taken from the top deck of the ship. A tall man with dark hair stood in silhouette, his arm slung around a glamorous blonde woman with a dazzling smile. The details were faint, but Savannah recognized the man's profile immediately. It was Matt. For a moment, Savannah couldn't breathe. Her mind scrambled to make sense of what she was seeing, the view, the deck, the unmistakable shape of her husband. She zoomed in, hoping, desperately, that it was some kind of mistake. But the way the woman leaned into him, the casual intimacy in their posture, shattered any illusion she might have clung to. Savannah's hand clenched around her phone. The cruise had been her surprise for him. Months of research, saving, and planning had gone into it. She had kept it a secret, imagining his face when she revealed the trip. And now, he was on the ship, enjoying her surprise with someone else. Her chest burned with a mix of betrayal and fury. He didn't even know this cruise had been meant for him. He had robbed her of her surprise, joy, and trust. Savannah scrolled through the woman's profile, her heart pounding as more photos loaded. Apparently, the woman, her name was Chloe, was everything Savannah wasn't. Young, blonde, effortlessly chic. Her profile comprised glamorous shots, expensive dinners, spa retreats, designer shopping bags. And now, Chloe had added a photo of her and Matt on her cruise. The caption on another photo read, "Feeling spoiled by this fantastic man." Savannah's fury reached a boiling point. Spoiled. Spoiled. By a man who'd barely managed to remember their anniversary most years. By a man who sent his wife on this trip alone so he could play house with his mistress. The audacity left her breathless. She wanted to scream, to throw her phone into the ocean, to march up to the top deck and confront them in front of everyone. But something stopped her. A voice in the back of her mind whispered, "No. Could you not give him that satisfaction? Don't let him win." Instead, Savannah took a deep breath and set her phone down. She wasn't going to let this break her. Not yet. First, she needed a plan. Savannah stayed awake long into the night, the soft hum of the ship's engines her only company. Her anger ebbed and flowed, waves of indignation crashing against the shore of her despair. But as the hours passed, something else began to take root, a steely determination. She wasn't going to let Matt ruin this for her. He had lied, cheated, and humiliated her, but she still had a choice. She could crumble, or she could fight back. Savannah didn't know what her plan would look like yet, but one thing was sure, this cruise wouldn't be his paradise. By the time the first light of dawn streaked across the horizon, Savannah had resolved to make her move. She wouldn't confront him outright, not yet. First, she needed to gather more information. If Matt thought he could keep her in the dark, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. That morning, Savannah dressed carefully, choosing a breezy linen sundress and styling her hair in loose waves. She wanted to blend in, to look like any other passenger. With her phone tucked discreetly into her bag, she ventured out of her cabin, ready to do some reconnaissance. She started with breakfast in the grand dining room, keeping her eyes peeled for Matt and Chloe. She spotted them almost immediately, seated at a table by the window. Chloe was laughing at something Matt had said, her hand resting on his arm. Savannah's stomach churned, but she forced herself to stay calm. This was just the beginning. Savannah quietly tracked their movements as she moved through the ship that day. She saw them lounging by the pool, sipping cocktails at the rooftop bar, and even signing up for a couple's dance class. Every sighting was like a knife to the chest, but Savannah channeled her pain into purpose. She wasn't just watching, she was learning. By the time evening rolled around, Savannah had a clear picture of their routine. And with Diego, a sympathetic bartender she'd befriended earlier in the day, she had an ally willing to help her start laying the groundwork for her revenge. The memories came unbidden, clawing at Savannah's chest like a cruel joke. As she moved through the ship, quietly plotting her next move, her mind drifted back to the early days of their marriage, days when money had been tight, but their love had been everything. She remembered the first time she and Matt had talked about taking a cruise. It was a cheap wine and instant ramen kind of night when they couldn't afford to splurge on more than the occasional movie rental. She'd shown him a glossy travel brochure she'd picked up at work. It was worn at the edges from how many times she'd flipped through it, dreaming. One day, he'd said, pulling her close as they lay on their threadbare couch. One day, I'll take you somewhere like this. Just you and me, no worries, no stress. I promise. She had believed him. She'd held on to that promise through years of scrimping and saving, late nights and second jobs, and every sacrifice they made to build a life together. And now, she was alone on that dream vacation, while Matt shared it with someone else, a woman who hadn't lifted a finger to earn it. The bitter taste of betrayal lingered in her mouth as she pushed open the door to the ship's piano bar. Diego was behind the counter, polishing glasses with his usual easy smile. His expression softened when he saw her. "Rough day?" he asked, pouring her a glass of white wine without waiting for her order. Savannah sat down, wrapping her fingers around the stem of the glass. "You could say that." Diego leaned in, his voice low. "I've seen them, you know. Him and the blonde." Savannah stiffened. "What?" "Couples like them, they're easy to spot. His all flash, buying drinks, showing off. She's dripping with attitude and, what do you call it? Entitlement." Diego shook his head. "It doesn't seem fair that someone like you has to deal with that." Savannah stared at him, surprised by the sting of tears in her eyes. She hadn't told Diego everything, but he was sharp enough to assemble the pieces. "It's not fair," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm not going to sit back and let them get away with it." Diego grinned, sliding her a napkin with a pen. "Good. Let's make a plan." The opportunity came the next morning. Savannah had spotted Matt and Chloe lounging by the pool in the prime seats they'd reserved early. Chloe, dressed in a glittering gold bikini and oversized sunglasses, was showing off her new accessory, a diamond ring that sparkled obnoxiously in the sunlight. Savannah's heart clenched. A ring. She could almost hear Chloe's smug voice in the caption that had likely accompanied the inevitable social media post. "When he loves you enough to make it official." Had Matt given her that ring? With their money? Savannah clenched her fists at her sides, her fury almost overwhelming. She remembered every dollar she had saved, every dream she had put on hold so they could get ahead, and now he was tossing it all away like it meant nothing. But Savannah didn't lose control. Not yet. She took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and walked away. She had work to do. She enlisted Diego's help to orchestrate a little accident. Diego passed the word along with a few subtle instructions to one of the pool attendants, who delivered the final touch. As Matt and Chloe reclined on their chairs, sipping their tropical drinks, a waiter appeared with a tray of pina coladas. "Compliments of the captain," he said with a smile, handing one to each of them. Matt raised his glass, grinning. "Cheers to that." He barely had time to take a sip before the pool attendant tripped, deliberately but convincingly, sending a tray of ice-cold water splashing down on Matt's lap. Chloe shrieked, leaping from her chair, while Matt jumped up, his soaked shorts clinging to his legs. "What the hell?" he barked, glaring at the flustered attendant. "I'm so sorry, sir," the attendant stammered. "It was an accident, I swear." Chloe rolled her eyes, muttering about incompetent staff, while Matt stormed off toward the men's locker room to change. Watching from a nearby lounge chair, Savannah sipped her cocktail and smiled to herself. It wasn't much, but it was a start. That evening, Savannah sat on her balcony, watching the sunset and letting the day's events play through her mind. She felt a flicker of satisfaction at the small victory, but the weight of her memories still pressed on her chest. She thought of the years she'd spent believing in Matt, in them. The nights she'd stayed up waiting for him to come home, the sacrifices she'd made to support his dreams, the countless times she'd convinced herself that things would get better. And now, here he was, throwing it all away for a woman who flaunted a diamond ring as if it were a trophy. Her phone buzzed with another notification. Chloe had posted again. This time, it was a picture of her hand, her perfectly manicured fingers showing off the ring, with the caption, "The best surprise. I can't wait for forever with you." Savannah felt something snap inside her. Forever. The gall of it. This woman's sheer, brazen audacity to flaunt what wasn't hers. Savannah set her wine glasses down and stared out at the darkening horizon. She didn't just want Matt to pay for what he'd done, she wanted Chloe to feel the sting of betrayal, too. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming her dignity, strength, and the life she had worked so hard to build. Savannah smiled to herself, a sharp, determined smile. Tomorrow, she wouldn't just be watching from the sidelines. Tomorrow, she'd ensure Matt and Chloe remembered who they were dealing with. She picked up her phone, scrolled through her messages, and texted Diego, "Let's up the ante." Certainly. Savannah woke the following day, her chest tight with determination. She wouldn't cry anymore. She wouldn't lie in bed wondering why she wasn't enough. No, Matt and his insufferable mistress had stripped her of too much already, her trust, her dreams, her dignity. It was time to take something back. Piece by piece. Her plan began with the morning poolside sabotage, a small act of justice hinting at the storm. The pool deck was buzzing with life, sunbathers sprawled across lounges, waiters weaving between chairs with colorful drinks. Savannah found her seat 2 rows back from Matt and Chloe, the perfect vantage point to observe without being seen. Chloe sat perched on the edge of her chair, dressed in a dramatic silver bikini and oversized sunglasses, practically oozing smug satisfaction. She leaned forward, angling her phone for the perfect shot of her freshly manicured hand, adorned with the diamond ring that sent Savannah's blood boiling every time she thought about it. The caption popped into Savannah's mind before Chloe even typed it. "My man spoils me in ways I never dreamed of." It didn't matter if Chloe wrote those exact words. Savannah knew they'd be something just as self-satisfied and dripping with gall. And Matt? He lounged beside her, oblivious, scrolling on his phone while Chloe gleefully flaunted the evidence of their betrayal. Savannah's smirk deepened. Her trap was already set. Earlier that morning, Diego had made a discreet exchange in their cabin, swapping out the sunscreen for tanning oil with an added little surprise. A touch of natural plant irritant, guaranteed to turn even the most golden tan into a blotchy, itchy disaster. Savannah watched Chloe spread the oil over her arms and legs, oblivious to the sinister secret hidden in the golden sheen. By mid-afternoon, her flawless skin had turned a blotchy crimson. Savannah could see Chloe fidgeting, her hands scratching her arms, her discomfort building. "Ooh!" Chloe shrieked suddenly, jumping up from her chair. Heads turned as she glared at her legs, now streaked with uneven patches of red. "I told you I have sensitive skin." She hissed at Matt, who looked up in startled confusion. "I must have had a reaction to that sunscreen you bought." Matt groaned, pinching the bridge of his nose. "It's sunscreen, Chloe. How can I mess up sunscreen?" Her voice rose, sharp enough to cut glass. "Because you bought some cheap, generic garbage, that's how." She stormed off, clutching a towel around herself as she headed for the spa. Matt watched her leave, muttering under his breath. Savannah caught a glimpse of the frustration on his face, the tightening of his jaw, the slump of his shoulders. It was subtle, but it was there, the first crack. Savannah leaned back in her chair, lifting her cocktail in a silent toast to her handiwork. When dinner rolled around, Savannah was ready for the next phase. She'd overheard Matt and Chloe's reservation at the ship's exclusive restaurant, the one advertised as the place for a romantic evening. Perfect. Through Diego's connections, Savannah had arranged for a little shake-up in their seating arrangements. When Matt and Chloe arrived, dressed to the nines and expecting a quiet table by the panoramic windows, they were instead led to a table directly in front of the kitchen doors. Chloe's nose wrinkled as waitstaff bustled past with clanging trays, and the faint smell of burnt butter wafted through the air. "This can't be right," she said, loud enough to make other diners glance their way. "We booked a premium table." The maître d' offered a polite, apologetic smile. "I'm sorry, but there's been a mix-up. We'll be happy to accommodate you at another time." Chloe huffed, throwing her napkin onto the table. "Unbelievable." Matt sank into his chair, his face reddening. "Can we just eat and not make a scene?" he muttered, glancing around as though hoping no one was watching. Chloe glared at him but sat down reluctantly. "This is not what I signed up for," she whispered harshly. Savannah, seated 2 tables away in a strategically shadowed corner, could barely contain her laughter. The tension between them was almost palpable, and it only got better when Chloe received an anonymous message on her phone, a little nudge from Savannah to keep the pot boiling. "Careful what you eat here. Rumor has it they serve frozen meals. Not exactly fine dining, huh?" Chloe frowned at her phone, her lips tightening into a thin line. "Someone just messaged me about this place," she said, showing Matt the screen. "They're saying it's frozen food." Matt groaned, rubbing his temples. Stop listening to random strangers online. But Chloe's mood was already ruined. She pouted her food around her plate, loudly nitpicking every bite. "This sauce is way too rich. Ooh, and the steak is overcooked. Did you taste this? It's like rubber." By the time dessert arrived, Matt's patience had worn thin. "For God's sake, Chloe, can we eat peacefully?" His voice was sharper than Savannah had ever heard, and Chloe's eyes widened in indignation. Savannah left before the final course, a sly smile on her lips. She didn't need to see how the evening ended to know it was a disaster. The final blow of the day came in the form of whispers. Savannah had spent the last 2 days carefully planting seeds of gossip among the staff, and by now, the rumor mill was in full swing. Everyone knew about the man on board who had brought his mistress instead of his wife. Everyone talked about the woman flaunting her ring and posting smug captions on social media. "Have you seen her posts?" Savannah overheard one passenger say to another near the pool. "She's practically gloating. It's disgusting. Can you imagine if the wife's actually on board? That would be explosive." The whispers had reached Chloe, who spent the afternoon pacing their cabin, clutching her phone like a lifeline. "People are staring," she hissed to Matt, her voice sharp and frantic. "I swear they know." Visibly on edge, Matt snapped back, "You're being paranoid." Matt glared at her. "I told you we shouldn't have posted anything. God, why didn't you listen to me? Because this is supposed to be a vacation, not some stupid drama." Chloe exploded. Matt ran a hand through his hair. "Can we go 1 hour without you complaining?" Savannah watched them argue from a distance, the corners of her mouth twitching in satisfaction. The cracks were widening, and Matt was unraveling. Tomorrow, she thought, would be even better. By the 3rd day of the cruise, Savannah wasn't just getting even, she was having fun. With Diego's help and the enthusiasm of an increasingly invested crew, she had turned her heartbreak into a collaborative revenge mission. Nearly everyone on board was rooting for her, from the housekeeping team to the entertainment staff. "This guy's a jerk," Diego said one evening, shaking a cocktail shaker with flair. "I mean, taking your wife's dream vacation with that woman? He deserves everything coming to him." Savannah smiled, sipping her drink. "He does. And lucky for me, I have a ship full of conspirators to help make that happen." Diego leaned in with a conspiratorial grin. "Wait till you see what we've planned for tonight." That evening, Savannah sat at her usual spot in the piano bar, where Matt and Chloe had become regulars, though their drinks had gotten progressively stiffer as the tension between them grew. Chloe's sunburn was still peeling, and her mood was as raw as her skin. Savannah had enlisted a couple she'd met during one of the ship's trivia nights, George and Linda, to help with her next move. Married for over 30 years, they were happy to help Savannah. "Let's give them a proposal to remember," Savannah had said. Something over the top, cheesy, and dripping with commitment. The plan unfolded perfectly. Just as Matt and Chloe settled into their drinks, George walked onto the stage, tapping the microphone to get the crowd's attention. Linda stood nearby, beaming and clutching a single red rose. "Ladies and gentlemen," George began, his voice trembling with mock sincerity, "I want to take a moment to tell you all about the love of my life. 30 years ago, I married this incredible woman." Chloe groaned audibly. "Oh, for God's sake," she muttered, swirling her cocktail. Matt sighed, already looking bored. George launched into a sickeningly sweet speech that could have come straight from a Hallmark card. "Every day, she shows me what it means to love someone truly. To be faithful. To honor your promises. To stand by each other through thick and thin." Savannah couldn't help but glance at Matt. His jaw tightened as George went on, emphasizing words like faithful and promises. "And tonight," George continued, dropping to one knee, "I want to renew my vow to love this woman forever." The crowd erupted into applause, and Linda gasped theatrically, clutching her chest. "Oh, George. Yes. 1,000 times yes." Chloe rolled her eyes so hard it was a wonder they didn't fall out of her head. "What a joke," she muttered. Savannah, sipping her wine in the shadows, couldn't stop smiling. The tension radiating from Matt and Chloe was delicious. Later that night, Savannah's next act of sabotage took place just outside Matt and Chloe's cabin. After hearing complaints from nearby guests about Chloe's overenthusiastic giggles and Matt's not-so-subtle grunting late at night, Savannah decided to make their intimate moments less intimate. She enlisted Alex, a teenage violinist who played in one of the ship's lounge acts, and whose enthusiasm far outpaced his talent. "You want me to play badly?" Alex asked, his eyes lighting up. "Yes," Savannah said. "Very badly. And only when they are busy." That evening, as Matt and Chloe retreated to their cabin, Savannah waited patiently for her cue. Sure enough, it wasn't long before she heard the unmistakable sounds of Chloe's high-pitched laughter and Matt's deep, rumbling voice through the thin cabin walls. Alex, stationed just outside, began his performance. The screeching wail of the violin echoed down the hallway, punctuated by off-key renditions of My Heart Will Go On and Unchained Melody. Passengers poked their heads out of their cabins, some laughing, others groaning, as Alex poured his heart and lack of skill into the music. Inside the cabin, chaos erupted. "What the hell is that?" Chloe shrieked. "It's a violin." Matt barked. "Well, make it stop." Savannah, listening from her hiding spot down the hall, laughed so hard she nearly fell off her bed. When the violinist finally stopped, there was a smattering of applause from the other passengers. Alex bowed dramatically, grinning ear to ear. The next morning, Savannah awoke to yet another Instagram post from Chloe, her overinflated ego still managing to shine through the cracks, sunburns and sleepless nights, but still living my best life with my man. #couple goals #forever and always. Savannah rolled her eyes. It was the same nauseating routine, Chloe gushing about Matt, trying to spin their increasingly disastrous trip into a picture-perfect fantasy. But Savannah had her own plan for social media that day. She quietly worked with Diego to send a few leaked messages to the ship's entertainment director, who just happened to be active on Instagram. Within hours, the whispers about Matt and Chloe became a full-blown storm. Passengers began commenting on Chloe's posts, their words dripping with sarcasm. #couple goals? Really? Does your man know what fidelity means? Forever and always. Does that include his actual wife? Loving this reality show. Can't wait for the finale. Chloe deleted several comments before eventually disabling her post entirely. She spent the rest of the day glued to her phone, muttering about jealous losers and weird vibes. Matt, on the other hand, seemed ready to crawl out of his skin. His normally polished appearance had taken a nosedive, his hair unkempt, his shirts wrinkled, and he snapped at Chloe every time she spoke. By the end of the day, Savannah felt a sense of triumph. Matt and Chloe were unraveling, their once picture-perfect vacation now a series of mishaps and public embarrassments. But she wasn't done yet. Oh, no. The best was yet to come. The screeching wail of the violin had barely ended when a furious Chloe yanked open the cabin door. Her golden hair was disheveled, her face a patchy red from irritation. Matt stood behind her, shirtless and visibly agitated. Outside stood Alex, the teen violinist, his instrument tucked under his arm and an innocent grin plastered on his face. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Chloe demanded, her voice sharp enough to make Alex flinch. "Are you trying to ruin our night?" "I'm terribly sorry," Alex said, his grin widening as he stuck to the script Savannah had given him. "I was requested by the lady in the cabin directly above yours. She asked for a romantic serenade, and I didn't want to disappoint." Chloe sputtered. "The cabin above? There's no lady in the—" Alex held up a piece of paper, pretending to read. "Yes, I was told this was the perfect spot to project the music. She wanted it to feel intimate." Matt groaned, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Intimate? Who even does this on a cruise?" "True romantics," Alex replied solemnly, tightening his grip on the violin. "Would you like me to continue? I could do Unchained Melody again, or perhaps something livelier. The chicken dance always gets a good reaction." Chloe gaped at him as though he'd suggested setting her luggage on fire. "No, we don't want, just leave." "As you wish," Alex said, giving them a slight bow before turning to walk away. But before he left, he paused in the middle of the hall, looked back at their open cabin door, and began playing one more screeching note, holding it long enough to send Chloe into an angry muttering. Inside her cabin, Savannah was curled up on her bed, shaking with laughter remembering when she could hear Chloe slamming the door and Matt grumbling about just wanting one peaceful night. Savannah sipped her coffee the following day on the deck as Diego joined her, still chuckling about the previous night's events. "You should have seen their faces," he said, setting down a tray of breakfast pastries. "That kid deserves a medal. The chicken dance bit. Genius. I'll have to thank him later," Savannah said, hiding her smile behind her mug. "Poor thing probably thought I was insane for asking him to play badly." Diego snorted. "Oh, he loved it. Said he's never had so much fun on the job." "Good," Savannah said, her smile widening. "Because this is only the beginning." Chloe and Matt emerged late that morning, clearly worse for wear. Chloe's face was still blotchy, her hair looked like she'd slept on it wet, and her irritation radiated like heat waves. Matt trailed behind her, his shoulders slumped, and his expression set somewhere between frustration and exhaustion. They bypassed the pool deck entirely, clearly avoiding the crowd, and retreated to the quieter promenade. But Savannah, with her growing network of conspirators, knew better than to leave them to their own devices. Later that afternoon, as Matt and Chloe tried to relax in their cabin, Savannah orchestrated another carefully planned inconvenience. With help from Diego and the housekeeping staff, Savannah had arranged for a series of accidental deliveries to their room. First came a cart piled high with towels they hadn't ordered, delivered by a particularly apologetic steward who insisted the system must have mixed things up. Next came a tray of clattering room service dishes, an order meant for a family on the opposite end of the ship. Following Savannah's instructions, the attendant knocked insistently until Matt opened the door, disheveled and glaring. "I didn't order this." Matt barked, waving his arms at the tray. "Oh dear," the attendant said, feigning panic. "This isn't 5107. So sorry, sir. I'll just..." He trailed off, fumbling with the tray and spilling ice water onto Matt's bare feet. The real pièce de résistance came later when Chloe called to complain about the interruptions. Now working through a sympathetic receptionist, Savannah made sure her complaint was noted but resolved in the least helpful way possible. "Don't worry, the receptionist said sweetly. "We've flagged your room as needing extra attention. You won't be disturbed again." Chloe slammed the phone and screamed, "What does that even mean?" By the end of the day, Matt and Chloe were visibly frayed. Savannah could see it in their body language, the way Chloe's head whipped around as if she expected someone to confront her at any moment, and the way Matt's shoulders hunched lower and lower, as though the ship's weight had landed on his back. The gossip had reached a fever pitch. Diego's network of crew members reported back with gleeful updates. Passengers in the spa are calling them the chaos couple. Chloe tried to take a selfie, and some guy photobombed it holding up a sign that said, wife or mistress. Savannah reveled in the knowledge that, for the first time, Matt and Chloe were the ones feeling out of control. After the previous day's chaos, Chloe decided she needed to reset with a relaxing spa day. Savannah, having overheard her grumbling about the booking at breakfast, enlisted her newfound favorite co-conspirator, Diego, to tweak Chloe's appointment. When Chloe arrived at the spa, she was greeted by a cheerful attendant who led her to a private treatment room. The problem? Instead of the deep tissue massage she had booked, Chloe was signed up for the Mud Detox Deluxe experience. "Oh, this is going to be incredible for your skin," the attendant gushed, smearing thick, sticky black mud across Chloe's face, neck, and arms. Chloe gritted her teeth, trying to play along. "Of course it is. It's just not what I was expecting." The absolute hilarity began when Chloe emerged from the spa to find that the mud treatment wasn't as washable as advertised. Patches of black residue clung stubbornly to her skin and hair, leaving her looking more like a cartoon villain than a luxury traveler. Passengers on deck stifled giggles as Chloe stormed past, her face streaked with remnants of mud. She mutteringly discussed lawsuits and incompetence. Savannah had heard Chloe chirping about their plans for the island excursion during breakfast. "It's going to be so romantic," Chloe gushed to Matt as they sipped their morning lattes in the grand dining room. "We'll get a private cabana, sip cocktails on the beach, maybe go snorkeling. Just the two of us, away from all the weirdness on this ship." Matt grunted in agreement, looking more like a man being dragged to execution than someone preparing for a day of luxury. Sitting nearby with Diego and some of her newfound allies, Savannah smirked. "Just the two of you. Let's see about that." Savannah's plan for the island started before Matt and Chloe even disembarked. With Diego's help, she enlisted several crew members stationed at the excursion desk to, accidentally, overbook their private cabana. "They'll still have a cabana," Savannah explained, "but let's make it communal. I think they could use some company. And the snorkeling gear?" Diego asked, grinning. Savannah grinned back. "Let's make sure they get the special set." The trouble started when Matt and Chloe arrived at their supposedly private cabana. Chloe's face fell when she saw it wasn't private at all. A family with 3 screaming kids was already spread out on the lounge chairs, their beach towels, pool floaties, and snack bags scattered across every available surface. "Excuse me." Chloe snapped at the father, who was currently wrestling a toddler into a pair of water wings. "This is our cabana. It's supposed to be private." The father looked up, unfazed. "Not according to the booking," he said, waving his receipt. "I guess we're sharing. It looks like you've got those 2 chairs over there." Chloe turned to Matt, her voice rising. "Do something." Matt sighed, looking helpless. "It's just for the day, Chloe. Let's not make a scene." "Not make a scene," she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "This is unacceptable." Meanwhile, Savannah lounged on a nearby beach chair, sipping a pina colada and enjoying the show. She had strategically placed herself within earshot, under the guise of reading a book. Chloe glared daggers the next hour at the family, who were obliviously building sandcastles and blasting kids' songs from a portable speaker. Determined to salvage the day, Chloe dragged Matt toward the snorkeling excursion. "This is supposed to be romantic," she muttered, stomping across the sand. "It's like this whole trip is cursed." When they arrived at the equipment station, a cheerful attendant handed them their snorkeling gear. Matt and Chloe didn't know that Savannah had arranged for their equipment to be personalized. Matt's mask had been pre-smeared with a thin layer of Vaseline, leaving his vision comically blurred as soon as he put it on. Chloe's flippers were mismatched sizes, one far too small, the other hilariously oversized. She didn't notice until she waded into the water, where she flailed ungracefully, kicking up sand and seaweed. "Why is this so hard?" Chloe shouted, splashing as she struggled to move forward. "Maybe if you stopped complaining for 5 seconds," Matt began, but was interrupted when a wave smacked him square in the face, knocking his mask askew. "Are you kidding me?" Matt sputtered, spitting out water and fumbling to adjust his slippery mask. Nearby snorkelers began to snicker, their laughter rising with every floundering move Chloe and Matt made. Savannah, bobbing discreetly in the water with her own properly functioning gear, took her time swimming past them, flashing a wide, satisfied grin. Chloe, noticing Savannah, narrowed her eyes. "What are you looking at?" she barked. Savannah shrugged. "Trouble in paradise." Chloe turned a violent shade of red, but another wave knocked her over before she could retort. She emerged sputtering, tangled in seaweed and swatting at an innocent fish that had swum too close. By mid-afternoon, Matt and Chloe had quit snorkeling and returned to the island's beachside cafe. Hot, frustrated, and nursing bruised egos, they ordered ice cream to cool down. Unbeknownst to them, Savannah had tipped off the cafe staff to their presence. With a few subtle hints, she ensured that the staff accidentally mixed up their orders. When Chloe's triple scoop cone arrived, it was already melting, the sticky chocolate dripping down her hand almost immediately. Seriously," she said, holding it at arm's length. Meanwhile, Matt's cup of vanilla came with a distinctly overpowering sprinkle of cayenne pepper, a prank Savannah had overheard the cafe chef use on unsuspecting friends. Matt took one bite and nearly choked. "What the hell is this?" he sputtered, his face red as he reached for Chloe's water. "It's vanilla," the server said innocently. "Is there a problem?" "It tastes like fire," Matt shouted, gulping down the water while Chloe glared at him. "Can we just have one normal thing today?" She snapped her ice cream, now a sticky mess running down her arm. Sitting at a nearby table, Savannah casually dipped her spoon into her perfectly crafted sundae and smiled. By the end of the day, Matt and Chloe were barely speaking. Their return to the cabana had been thwarted by a sand-covered toddler dumping a bucket of water on their towels, and Matt's attempt to take a relaxing dip had ended with a jellyfish scare that sent him sprinting out of the water, yelping. Chloe's patience, worn thinner than her peeling sunburn, finally exploded as they waited for the ferry back to the ship. "This entire day has been a disaster," she shouted. "It's like everything is cursed." "Maybe it's not the day," Matt muttered. "What's that supposed to mean?" Chloe snapped, hands on her hips. "Maybe," Matt started but then stopped, shaking his head. "Forget it." Savannah, standing nearby with Diego, couldn't help but grin. The cracks between them were no longer cracks, they were full-blown chasms. "Think they'll survive the rest of the trip?" Diego asked, watching the two squabble as they boarded the ferry. Savannah took a sip of her cocktail and smiled. "Not if I can help it." Matt and Chloe attempted a quiet breakfast on the outdoor deck the following morning, hoping to avoid the rising tide of stares and whispers. Savannah, of course, was already 2 steps ahead. Through Diego, she had arranged for one of the crew to leave breadcrumbs scattered strategically around Matt and Chloe's favorite table. The result? A flock of overzealous seagulls descended just as somebody served them their plates. Matt flailed wildly, trying to shoo the birds away. "Get out of here," he shouted, accidentally knocking over his orange juice. Meanwhile, Chloe shrieked as a particularly bold seagull snatched a piece of her croissant right off her plate. "This is disgusting," she screamed, brushing invisible crumbs off her lap as though the mere presence of the birds had soiled her. Savannah, seated a few tables away, calmly enjoyed her coffee, watching as the chaos unfolded. "Nature," she murmured to herself with a smirk. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Savannah had planned her pièce de résistance that evening. Karaoke night in the main lounge. Knowing that Matt hated public embarrassment and Chloe loved attention, she combined their worst fears into one spectacular prank. Savannah bribed the karaoke host to randomly call Matt and Chloe up as the following duet, handing them microphones and insisting it was their turn. "A couple that sings together stays together," the host declared, earning a round of applause from the crowd. Chloe, eager to soak up the limelight, enthusiastically grabbed the microphone. Matt, however, looked like he wanted to crawl under the nearest table. The song choice. A painfully on-the-nose rendition of "I Will Survive." Chloe, who couldn't carry a tune if her life depended on it, belted out the lyrics with wild abandon, completely oblivious to the irony. Matt, mortified, stood stiffly beside her, mumbling a few half-hearted words into the microphone as the audience erupted into laughter. When the song ended, the host grinned and added, "Wow, folks. Give it up for the new definition of couple goals." Savannah clapped the loudest. After the karaoke disaster, Matt and Chloe retreated to their cabin, only to face another sleepless night. Savannah had recruited Alex, the bad violinist, for an encore performance. This time, Alex claimed he had been mistakenly sent to serenade the wrong cabin. "Oh, terribly sorry," Alex said when Matt flung open the door in his pajamas. "The lady in 6107 above you requested, all by myself. But since I'm here." Without waiting for a response, Alex launched into his ear-splitting rendition of the ballad, complete with dramatic flourishes that sent Matt's blood pressure skyrocketing. "Get out!" Matt bellowed, slamming the door. But even behind the closed door, Alex's violin screeched on, leaving Chloe groaning. Why is this ship full of maniacs? By the 5th day, the pressure had taken its toll on Chloe. She spent most of her time complaining loudly to Matt, who barely held himself together. Her social media account had been flooded with sarcastic comments from passengers. Her attempts to pose for photos were interrupted by snickering onlookers, and she had resorted to wearing oversized sunglasses and a floppy hat everywhere she went. During a wine tasting event, Savannah overheard Chloe muttering about her ruined vacation. "It's like the universe is against us," she said, stomping her foot in frustration. "Maybe it's karma," Savannah quipped from across the room. Chloe spun around, her mouth opening and closing like a goldfish. Before she could respond, another passenger said, "Or maybe it's just what happens when you steal someone else's man." The entire room erupted in laughter, and Chloe, unable to take it anymore, stormed out, dragging Matt behind her. Savannah sipped her wine, satisfied. She didn't need to confront them directly. Her work was already done. Matt and Chloe were utterly defeated by the cruise's final night. They spent most of the evening hiding in their cabin, avoiding the stares, whispers, and constant inconveniences that Savannah and her allies had orchestrated. As the ship pulled into port the following day, Savannah stood on the deck, watching the coastline come into view. She felt lighter than she had in years. Her grief and anger transformed into a quiet, triumphant satisfaction. "Here's to fresh starts," Diego said, joining her with 2 glasses of champagne. "To fresh starts," Savannah agreed, clinking her glass against his. "This is the end, thank you for listening."